guy who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling. Ooh, that's not fraught with risks. You thought gain-of-function research on pathogens was dangerous. Try that. But that hasn't stopped Harvard University. Its scientists are testing that technology by spewing calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Now, just to restate, Bill Gates is not God. Bill Gates is some kind of weird, socially awkward rich guy who lives in Seattle. He doesn't own the planet, but he's now changing the planet single-handedly. This is not just over his yard in Seattle. This is over your yard and our oceans and the whole planet. Now, according to Forbes, Frank Kutch, who's the project's top investigator, quote, does not know what the results might bring. Just experiment with the globe and find out what happens. It's cool that he's a billionaire. Michael Schellenberger is the author of Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, which it does, as our rivers and oceans get dirtier and no one notices. Michael, it's great to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
It's a little alarming to think that someone as myopic and out of touch and totally ideological and weird as Bill Gates thinks he's in charge of the planet. What should we be worried about here?
I mean, basically everything. I mean, when I first heard about this over 2 decades ago, this was a thought experiment, but this is real. They're really trying to do this. They've encountered opposition every step of the way. I've co-authored articles with the Harvard investigator. We've told him personally this is a terrible idea. The vast majority of scientists disagree with this. You have to remember what they're proposing to do is identical to what we feared would occur after nuclear war in the 1980s, which is nuclear winter. The idea is that you cool the planet deliberately. The effects on crops are completely unknown. They call this an experiment, but they know that there is no way to figure out what the large-scale planetary effects of this kind of thing would be. It's grossly irresponsible. They know for a fact that they will never get international agreement on this. So they're basically trying to socialize the idea, normalize the idea, make us comfortable with an idea that should make us extremely uncomfortable.
The COP27 summit is underway in Egypt as leaders get together to discuss climate change. We'll be discussing conspiracy theories, of course, on climate change, notably the HAARP conspiracy theory, where there are many who believe that climate change is due to HAARP, not global warming. So HAARP would be this ultra-secret climate-controlling weapon supposedly belonging to the U.S. Army. We'll explain HAARP a little bit more in detail. Let's just navigate here through some recent examples of this conspiracy theory online. We have this tweet today from the World Health Organization that says the climate crisis is causing extreme weather events like floods and heavy rainfall. This is putting lives in danger. Of course, we know this to be true, but there are some users that allege that you know what else is causing extreme weather events. HAARP and geoengineering, which go hand in hand, weather modifications. There's one tweet, right there from the WHO. There's also So these TikToks, this user in French claiming that the actual temperatures right now aren't real. Do your research on HAARP. Or this video right here of this user from October, so pretty recent as well, as conspiracy theorists claim that HAARP is a weather modification ultra-secret research program of the U.S. government. Mark?
So, what is HAARP? And does it really exist? Tell us more.
So HAARP does exist. It's a research program. It stands for High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, and it's based in Alaska. So here we have a video of its location right here of this research program in Alaska, a program that was originally financed by the U.S. Army from the 1990s up to 2014, and then it was passed on to the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 2015. Here we have an up-close image on Google Earth of this research program composed of up to 190 antennas. We can see it up close here on Google Earth, and these antennas and radio transmitters right here.
Acclaimed architect and eventual designer of the St. Louis Arch, Aerosols, is secretly enlisted by the United States military to work for a new clandestine organization. Its name? The OSS, Office of Strategic Services, or as it is known today, the CIA.
The fact that Aerosols was in the OSS designing weapon systems during World War II, and at a time when the OSS was looking into ways to weaponize weather, makes his whole connection to the design of the St. Louis Arch extremely interesting. Now, that isn't to say I believe it can control the weather, but it does open the door to the idea that it might have been one of the things Saarinen was out to achieve.
While at the OSS, Saarinen designed buildings and weapon systems, many of which were never completed or built. Is it possible he later used these secret plans to engineer the St. Louis Arch, creating something that can actually control or perhaps harness the weather?
Controlling the weather is the ultimate superweapon. It's even more powerful than the atomic bomb. So if Aerosols was involved in analyzing and studying the possibility of weather modification, and you put all those factors together, and I think you have a guy that basically conducted a big, giant weather modification experiment with the St. Louis Arch.
Weather as a weapon? There are some who think the idea is not as preposterous as it seems, especially when considering that even today, many world governments are pouring millions of dollars into research designed to manipulate weather.
I think weather modification has definitely been an ongoing endeavor of governments all over the world for decades. The St. Louis Arch appears to be an experiment in weather modification. The HAARP device appears to be an experiment in weather modification. Who knows what the Russians or the Chinese are doing? There's some sort of technology out there.
There's been lots of work in the field of weather control, using silver iodide inside of thunderstorms to decrease the size of hail. That goes on in many parts of the world to alleviate that problem. They're always firing rockets into the atmosphere in China to manipulate the weather. But is this a good idea?
You wonder if you could steer a tornado. What would it take? Even a nuclear weapon might just nudge it, if even that.
One challenge with that is your shock wave is going to be hard to focus, perhaps, and it might cause the damage you were hoping to avoid with the tornado. I would be looking at how much can I control or change local pressures in the atmosphere near and around the tornado.
These are forces at work that could wipe out major cities. And we're finding out every day new things that we've never seen before. So maybe the lesson learned here is we shouldn't meddle with forces that we don't really understand, because we may not like the result.
For us to hear from the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Without further ado, please welcome Director John Brennan.
Moreover, as we have seen with just about every scientific leap forward, new technologies often carry substantial risks to the same degree that they hold tremendous promise. Nowhere are the stakes higher for our national security than in the field of biotechnology. Recent advances in genome editing that offer great potential for breakthroughs in public health are also cause for concern, because the same methods could be used to create genetically engineered biological warfare agents. Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions will still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives.
The death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, are being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, in England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States but in Mexico and Canada. Birds are dying around the world. Fish are dying by the hundreds of thousands around the world. This is genocide. This is poison. This is murder by the United Nations. This element within our society that's doing this must be stopped. I personally have observed the planes. They have no markings on them. They're huge, bomber-like airplanes. No markings. Crime against humanity, crime against America, crime against the citizens of this great country. They must be stopped. What is wrong with Congress? This has an effect on their population and their people and their friends and their relatives and themselves. What's wrong with them? What's wrong with the pilots who are flying these airplanes? They're dumping this crap, this poison on their own families. Somebody has to do something about it. Somebody in Congress has to step forward and stop it now. And thank you. I'm Ted Gunderson.
Well, Ted, you talk too much, and you're in front of a camera too often, and they don't like that. You know, when I first met you 30 years or so ago, you came in to see my mother. I didn't trust you. I said you were the FBI, and I was calling the FBI because I knew that things were going on. Is the agency today what it was 40 years ago?
The FBI today is not the agency it was 40 years ago, and I'm convinced that the FBI today has been infiltrated by the Illuminati, as has the CIA, as has military intelligence, as has NSA, and I think our government's being run by the Illuminati, to be honest with you.
Well, the CIA has been often called the enforcement arm of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. at 58 East 68th Street in New York City.
I would guess the mentality of these people who are doing this, there could be mind control victims, or I would say the military, and they do what they're told. But the thing that bothers me is, don't these pilots know that they're putting death dump on their own families? Okay, that would bother me if I was doing this and dumping this poison on my own family. And I don't understand it. I can't understand it. I can't explain it either.
His mate's just coming up to him. His mate's just coming up to him to set.
And that message calls for new frontiers, new visions. It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
this on YouTube.
Video right now? Oh God, don't video right now.
It's like it's spraying out of the top of his wings.
Don't do any evidence.
As the Biden administration signals its fight against global warming may actually involve blocking sunlight. The White House posting research claiming, quote, solar radiation modification would enable better informed decisions about the potential risk and benefits of SRM as a component of climate policy alongside the foundational elements of greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. Our next guest warns this is simply government's way to control your weather. Mark Morano, publisher of ClimateDepot.com, and he joins us now. Okay, Mark, you know, my take this morning was maybe this is one of those or else, you know, get on board with everything else or we're going to block the sun. But I guess it's a little bit more, reality than that. Tell us about it.
Well, this is actually Bill Gates funding this as well through Harvard University. This is retro 1970s. In the 1970s, they believed that our fossil fuels were creating aerosols, blocking the sun, creating man-made global cooling. So they came up with the same kind of geoengineering solutions back then. They wanted to put black soot on the Arctic to melt it. There was one proposal to use nuclear energy to help loosen the Arctic ice caps because they thought they were growing too much. And John Holdren, back in the Obama administration, also supported this kind of geoengineering, if you will, of the climate. This is radical, risky, unproven, unknown effects, but they're doing it as a sort of lever over us to say now in the Biden administration, kind of like, yeah, we know this is dangerous, we don't know the effects, but darn it, people aren't buying electric cars fast enough, or they're not embracing Green New Deal policies, so we have to risk our entire planet with this insane kind of research. It's basically weather modification. China's been doing it for years. It's another form of what the U.S. government has even been doing. The ABC News meteorologists bragged about the cloud seeding they're doing to increase rain or snow and storms. They will control the government will control the weather, and you will be happy. That seems to be the new motto.
One thing I did is I grabbed mine, and I go along the basic guidelines. I got mine as an example every time, and this one I think I can build mine.
Yeah. I mean, it's little things, like after an exclamation point you need 2 spaces and then capital, but after a semicolon only 1 space. Not like, where's that shit written?
It isn't, it's just
not
known.
Is that? It's not intelligent. Probably, but dude, no clues.
The EPR, look, when we go to ALS, and we do our EPR, not EPRs, but our bullets over there, it is absolutely, without a doubt, not anything like the bullets you put on a real EPR.
Really?
The bullets over there are 2 lines. It's 2 lines. Each bullet is 2 lines long, and it's like...
We don't do that.
No.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rosalind Peterson, and in 2007, I was invited by the United Nations to be a keynote speaker at their conference on climate change, agriculture, and other issues. I hope that you will enjoy the presentation you're about to see, because part of it is my presentation at the United Nations, and you're going to see a segment of this presentation. I talked about geoengineering, weather modification, man-made clouds, and I also spoke about atmospheric heating and testing programs that all are having an impact on agriculture and our local and weather conditions, and also the weather conditions around the world. We are modifying our weather in many, many ways, and this conference about climate change has to take into account that we have aviation-induced weather modification as well as weather modification programs that are ongoing. 66 in the United States at this time, and hundreds in other countries as well. Each of these weather modification programs and experiments changes the global climate as well as local weather conditions. Geoengineering, solar radiation management, has to do with putting particles and chemicals into the atmosphere in order to reduce the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth. Under solar radiation management, the production of man-made clouds by aviation, and a lot of military jets in particular, has begun to change our local climate, our local weather, and it has begun to make a direct impact on the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth. In so doing, it has reduced the amount of vitamin D we absorb through the skin, increasing the health effects like rickets across the United States and other problems associated with the lack of vitamin D. In addition, we have dropped the amount of photosynthesis available to trees and plants to produce our crops and to grow healthy and strong. With this reduction in photosynthesis, we are imperiling our agriculture crop production, and there have been a number of studies which show that the increasing cloud cover produced by aviation is definitely lowering crop production. And so we have to look at these issues before we look at other efforts to mitigate climate change. The water vapor that man-made aviation produces actually traps heat, and in Alaska it is responsible for some of the warming that is occurring there and the melting at this time. We have to examine these issues as well. My speech covers geoengineering and the man-made cloud cover that we're seeing in the skies on an almost daily basis in not only California, but across the United States. It changes our weather, and we have to realize the huge impact that that makes on all of us. Some of the programs are rocket-produced, where rocket chemicals are released deliberately, like aluminum oxide by the U.S. Navy and NASA, to put up a cloud cover of particles, aluminum oxide particles, in order for them to conduct tests and experiments. What we're not aware of, and the testing has not been done, is what impact those particles are having on soil, water, air pollution, all kinds of plants that may be susceptible to the increase in aluminum in our soils. We know that there are detrimental effects. We also know that when you conduct atmospheric experiments and put up particles and chemicals and reduce the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth, you also lower solar panel power production. You begin to increase molds, mildews from higher humidity being trapped against the Earth, because the only way heat can escape is through clear skies. Man-made clouds tend to trap heat. So what you're going to see is part of my presentation at the United Nations as a keynote speaker coming up. And you can see the whole speech. It's online. You can look at the whole United Nations presentation. That is also online. And you can go to visit my website for the documents, the studies, and the research that I have conducted with regard to these topics since this program was first aired to the public after its presentation at the United Nations. I want to thank you very much. We hope that you enjoyed this program. And please have a good day and use the information to the benefit of everyone. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Dr. Rosalind Peterson. She's the California president and co-founder of the Agriculture Defense Coalition, formed in 2006. She's the California president and co-founder of the Agriculture Defense Coalition, formed in 2006 to protect agriculture crop production from uncontrolled experimental weather modification programs. A very interesting topic, you know, for a non-specialized person like myself. But also very interesting in her CV that we have with you is also her extensive efforts to protect drinking water supplies from toxic chemical contamination in Martinez, California. That's a very interesting topic, of course, and I was actually wondering myself whether you can tackle whether the same experiments that you're holding in California could be extended to other world countries, particularly poor and developed countries like where we come from. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. It is a pleasure to be here to speak with all of you today. One of the things that I would like to say is that we are in a global drumbeat right at the moment talking about climate change and global warming. One of the things that is affected by climate change is agriculture. But some of what we are seeing is man-made, but man-made in a different way than you may guess. Weather modification programs, experimental ones done by private companies, done by the United States government, done by states across the United States are underway. There's more than 50 of them in operation across the United States. All of these impact agriculture because they change the microclimates needed for agriculture to survive. None of these programs that I know of today, and this is all public record, are available at any time with oversight, agricultural oversight or public oversight. These programs impact agriculture, and there are programs around the world. International corporations are modifying our weather all the time, and they're modifying it in ways that cover thousands and thousands of square miles. Most of it is chemically altered, so that what happens is that we are putting chemicals, ground-based chemicals that are shot into the air, or chemicals coming from airplanes that change and modify our weather. So one of the things that I'm concerned about and that we need to address in the future is how these programs are impacting microclimates needed for our crops to survive and needed for pollination. If we change the growing season, the pollinators may not survive, and also our crops, our flowers, and our tree crops may not get the pollination needed. So one of my areas is looking at this situation to see if we can begin to put under control experimental and other types of weather modification programs. The other issue is that a lot of times we're talking about mitigation for climate change. It's rather an undefined term at this period of time. And so what happens is that many times we're talking about artificially putting chemicals like sulfur or particulates into the atmosphere in what they call geoengineering schemes to reduce and help the planet, supposedly, but help the planet to not go through such a tremendous global climate change and to mitigate global warming. However, the incidence of putting chemicals into our atmosphere is going to change and impact agricultural crop production. And if you take and you put up into our skies chemicals to reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the earth, you are going to begin to reduce crop production. Studies at the University of Illinois on corn crop production show reductions. Without the process of photosynthesis, whereby plants from direct sunlight gain the energy to grow, to produce crops, we are going to find ourselves, if we mitigate in that direction, impacting the crop production not only here in the United States, but worldwide. One of the things that is impacting crop production right now in the United States and reducing photosynthesis and also impacting the ability of solar power panels to generate the type of power that they should is persistent jet contrails. NASA talks about persistent jet contrails as exacerbating global warming because they trap warmth in the atmosphere when they produce cirrus and man-made clouds. NASA also talks about that these aircraft leaving persistent contrails are changing our climate. And when they change our climate to the degree that one jet can leave a persistent jet contrail which will spread across our skies from what this picture up here on my left on the screen looks like, which is a trail left by a jet. That trail can expand to 4,000 kilometers and last for 20 hours. This was unheard of in the early 60s and the 70s, and it wasn't until the late 1980s that there was a change and we started to have persistent jet contrails that persist. NASA studies show that part of our global warming problem could be attributed to these types of contrails and the jets that leave them. So one of the issues as we go through is, how do you like your skies, natural or man-made? And right now we are making man-made clouds, and this is trapping warmth in our atmosphere. The climate change that is produced by these jets, not all jets, mostly some non-commercial, but what happens to our skies is that we start to see the changes. The man-made clouds do trap the warmth, and they increase the humidity. This allows for pests to proliferate, diseases, molds, mildews, funguses, and viruses. This is a man-made cloud, ladies and gentlemen, and these pictures I took myself over Northern California, and this is a burst. This is where a jet left a huge plume, and then this turned in at the end of it to a burst, and this is not normal. Never seen before in our county historically, and I was born and raised there. This is another picture showing the jet trail just before the burst. This is our skies, and I want you to know that what you're seeing now, a lot of times many scientists know, especially at NASA and in other areas, that the skies that we're seeing are not normal cloud formations. These are man-made. And what happens as we reduce the amount of sunlight in a form of global dimming, we reduce the solar power with these type of clouds, and we reduce photosynthesis, which is going to impact agriculture. The pictures look odd. The formations don't look like normal clouds that people have seen before historically. This is another type of man-made cloud, and what we have done and what you're seeing here is we have the photographs from the times that the jet leaves the first trail as a thin, spindly trail to where they form into these different types of cloud formations. All of you can start looking up and seeing this. What happens is that there are experiments, and there's a color, you can see some color in this photograph. And part of what we're doing also is we're sending up canisters. The United States government, NASA, the U.S. Air Force, is sending up canisters into the atmosphere filled with chemicals to modify and experiment with our ionosphere. And when we modify and experiment with our ionosphere up here, we create experiments which they can see through these persistent jet contrails as they stay in the sky for long periods of time, and they can watch the experiments. The type of chemicals they are using are aluminum, barium, strontium, and these canisters are sent up on rockets, and what they do is they superheat the canisters to create experiments in our atmosphere. The experiments can give you colorful auroras, which they talk about as being wonderful. Many times people think that the auroras in Alaska and the ones we see are normal, but there's beginning to be more and more seen across the United States and elsewhere where aluminum, trimethyl aluminum experiments to make clouds are beginning to impact us. The reason I am concerned for agriculture is that none of these experiments have any public oversight nor agricultural oversight. Our drinking water is impacted because the chemicals are now beginning to show up in our drinking water. In California, the State Department of Health drinking water tests were examined between 1970 and this year, and we found unusual spiking in barium, aluminum, strontium, magnesium, calcium, manganese, and all of these spiked at the same time in various drinking water supplies across the state of California and also in Arizona. So what's happening with these atmospheric tests is that aluminum, as one example, gets into, with increased pollution and acid rain, gets into the root systems of our crop trees and our trees, and it looks like the trees are dying of drought. But they're not. What happens is that the root systems can no longer absorb the water and the nutrients needed to survive. Many of our forests in Redding, California, and other areas are dying. The oak trees, the redwood trees, the Douglas fir across the United States, many areas. We believe that these trees are impacted because they cannot absorb enough water because aluminum is going into their root systems. Also, molds, mildew, and fungus from warmer temperatures produced by persistent jet contrails are also allowing pests and molds to proliferate, also impacting tree health and crop health. The skies that you see up here, it is important to note, have a white haze to them. When crossing the United States 2 days ago, we saw this man-made produced haze all the way across the United States. There were a few real clouds. We saw the persistent jet contrails from the jet windows, and the skies in the white haze looked a lot like this. So one of the things that we need to really look at is that jet fuel emissions contaminate our air, much as automobile exhaust. They know from scientific studies back in the 1970s that they deplete beneficial ozone in the atmosphere by releasing nitric acid. So one of the things that we need to look at is the impact of just jet fuel and just the emissions from jets as well. I want to go on and talk briefly about a couple of issues here that I think are important for everyone to realize. If we don't look at the problems that we are creating, the atmospheric testing programs, in other words, the jet contrails that are warming our climate, and we say to ourselves, we want to geoengineer something else. We want to add more particulates to help global warming or to stop climate change. What we're going to have is we're going to have a pea soup up there of chemicals which are going to be detrimental to our health. It is much better to take the EPA model of the 1970s, where the Environmental Protection Agency was designed to put in regulations to reduce the pollution at its source, to reduce and put caps on how much pollution corporations, cars, automobiles were putting into the atmosphere. One of the things that we're talking about as mitigation is to go into geoengineering plans which add more chemicals to our atmosphere, which are going to get into our drinking water supplies, which are going to get into our soils, which are going to impact our trees. Our trees across the United States, many of them in many areas, especially Mendocino, Lake, and Sonoma County, are dying. They are not healthy as they used to be. And this problem, having traveled across the United States into some other areas, seeing the pictures coming in from across the United States and other countries, we're finding that there's beginning to be an impact from all of these programs and all the chemicals in our skies. And so one of the things we need to think about and work for is reducing pollution. Alan Buckman from the California State Department and Fish and Game talked about microbes, and they're important to the environment. We have at our disposal already some technologies and already the wherewithal to begin to make the planet more healthy and to put it into a different perspective. But if we go to the geoengineering schemes that are waiting in the wings, thousands of them, to put the particulates up and sulfur, then we are going to be in trouble with agriculture across the United States and around the world. It is time that we look at some different solutions that are already here, and it's time that we look at what's happening in our skies and say we don't need to add any more chemicals, we are doing enough. And what these experiments in our skies are doing with atmospheric heating and testing, we don't know, but the chemicals are showing up in our drinking water. So in closing, I would like to say to all of you and to encourage you to know that just what I showed you today is beginning to impact crop production in the United States. And we're seeing higher UV radiation that is burning the tips of our trees and our plants. We see the molds and mildews growing here. And we see all of this, and we hope that all of you will consider before you think of mitigation and just go forward with some of the plans that are being sold to you as almost a cap-and-trade situation, where a corporation like Planktos decides to put iron dust into the Galapagos Islands area. This is a proposal, may have already started, and to create algae blooms. And yes, they're saying, yes, we're going to help the environment because we're going to create these algae blooms for more oxygen. But what happens is it's going to impact the marine life in those areas. As a geoengineering plan, it is going to be sold.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal, they're not natural. There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's got to be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
I'm here to give you testimony that chemtrails, they're not contrails, are indeed real. They're spraying almost every day. I watch the clouds and watch the spraying program going on. I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs. They're dark operations. That's why they're not out in the media.
I look around and I see people are starting to look up and see this. Many times I've spoken about chemtrails, and I get this blank look on my face. What are you talking about? I'm saying, look up. As a pilot, before I fly, I look up. And so, boy, they're really out there working.
When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
There's a huge amount of aluminum being found because these sprays have aluminum, strontium, barium, manganese. And there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found. But aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum in the soil, which is not natural.
The metal compounds that are being used are environmentally dangerous. We need to be monitoring them. We need to be testing them.
Okay, these previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0. So 13,100 is pretty damn much, folks. It used to be 0, then it was 100s in the 2000s, and then since 2010, it's into the 1,000s and the latest 13,100. In the snow on Mount Shasta, pristine Mount Shasta, 61,000 micrograms per liter, 4 times the amount that is found in the soil up there. Where in the hell is this stuff coming from if it's not coming from the soil?
We have clouds in the sky we've never seen before. Almost every day I'm seeing clouds I've never seen before. And NASA has been even named a few of these new clouds. It's really interesting, but NASA is a corporation. I want you to know that.
NASA has also conducted a research program in what they call metallized fuels. We're actually putting aluminum oxide right in the fuel because it has 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So during the combustion process, it releases all that oxygen and dramatically increases efficiency, but it leaves the aluminum in the air.
We got things coming from sky down, and it's a huge, huge problem. Because as it comes down, what happens is a couple of things. Is that it actually is in our air, we breathe it. And as we breathe it, it's actually going to go up through our nostrils, into our brain, easiest access to our brain frontal lobe. The contaminants that have been identified, which already been mentioned, are aluminum. Aluminum is the #1 free radical generator to the brain to cause early apoptosis, which is early death of brain, and it begins to set off the scar tissue, which we call the amygdalin, which is part of the chemical matrix related to Alzheimer's.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years, and in the past 5 years I've seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increase, almost quadruple.
I became interested in chemtrails about 8 years ago when I was in Hawaii, and the Hawaiians are really being very vocal about it. I concur about the increasing number of Alzheimer's. They have been able to take the aluminum and micronize it, which means it'll stay up longer, but it also means, and I don't know if any of you have noticed some metallic taste in your mouth when they're spraying, but you inhale that, it goes up through your cribriform plate and through your sinuses and into the brain.
As you heard, to spray nanoparticles, very small particles. These nanoparticles, they basically trigger a programmed cell death in the brain, and that is the ultimate path we see in Alzheimer's.
That's problem #1, because when we look at the Alzheimer issue, we say those are the old. The real problem is, and the real scare I have, is as I am a father of 2, I'm a grandfather of 3, so the drama is our children. ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you were 80.
If you remember 8 to 10 years ago, there was this big move to get rid of aluminum from underarm deodorant, is what causes Alzheimer's. Look what they're doing to us now.
I want to give you a little bit of history on the background behind nanoparticles has been described before. A nanometer is 1 billionth of a meter. It's very small. In fact, if you have particles, say, that are 40 or 50 nanometers across, you can take and line 50 of them up next to a single red blood cell. These things are extremely tiny. They're pervasive.
The collapse and decrease of agriculture is something I worry about even more than the previous info about autism and Alzheimer's.
Believe me, I'm seriously concerned with what I'm watching. As a wildlife biologist, I've been watching the ecosystem collapse. When you lose all your stream organisms, when you have aluminum overload in your streams, you're killing your microbial bacteria and you're disrupting the entire ecosystem. So it goes way beyond just a little bit of pollution. How did Monsanto know to create aluminum-resistant plants? I don't think I've heard anybody ask that question. Okay.
Insects. I've done studies in Siskiyou County. They're at 20% of normal. The aquatic insects basically made a nosedive in 2006 to about 20% of normal. So far this year, I've sampled 200 trout stomachs. 98% of them are empty. So sorry about the trout fishing, fellows. The mayflies, stoneflies, dipterus, and caddisflies are damn near gone. The terrestrial sampling is down to about 20% of normal, except for pest species like ants. We're seeing a loss in major bird species, and as the gentleman said, the ecosystem is unraveling, and Audubon's been telling you that for years.
The materials that are going into the environment right now, aluminum oxide nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles, these just happen to be the same materials that they use in nanothermate explosives. And so when this stuff settles down out of the air into the environment, it is small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the trees in the forest. And so when there's a forest fire, and there will be a forest fire, those fires burn dramatically hotter. The point is that the cost of firefighting, the cost in the healthcare system have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of acreage is lost because of fires. The impact on human health is dramatic.
I personally tested water and aluminum, and I found aluminum had 47 times the normal expected amounts. Strontium had 10 to 20 times the amounts. Barium was 20 times. This is what the stuff looks like here. Collected, most people just think it's a cobweb, but I tested it, it has outrageous amounts of barium, strontium, and aluminum, but they destroy the sample, so I'm not letting this get away from me.
You know, these tests are international in scope. We're seeing this all over the world, guys. Okay, pH of acid soils is 20 times more alkaline. The aluminum in the soil has doubled in the last 10 years. The rain normal was 5.6, it's 20 times more alkaline. Aluminum blocks essential nutrients. I am unable in my garden to restore normal pH, and that's because nanoparticles are now in the circulatory systems of both plants and humans.
The Air Force conducted a study starting in 1993. It was called In Vitro Toxicity of Aluminum Nanoparticles in Rat Alveolar Macrophages. That's a real fancy way of saying testing the effect of aluminum nanoparticles on the white blood cells in the little air sacs in your lung, the alveoli. And what they found in this 8-year study was that these particles, when you're exposed to them long enough, it suppresses the ability of your white blood cells to defend you from airborne infections coming into your lungs. So it suppresses your immune system. But they also found that these same particles, once they get into your system, they can actually go through the barrier in each one of the cells. They get inside the cells, and these particles can actually suppress the ability of mitochondria, which are in the cells that help to gobble up toxins and things that would be harmful to the nucleus and the reproduction process of the cells in your body. These processes are suppressed, and so essentially by breathing this material in, your immune system is dramatically suppressed.
I wrote to the federal government because Air Force wrote a book, and on the first page of the book they said, we're going to control the weather by the year 2025. I asked them, what are they doing spraying these chemicals on the public? I said, there's a violation of United States Code 50 U.S.A. 1520, which prohibits the American government from experimenting on the U.S. citizens with chemical agents. I said that law also requires who's ever experimenting, when the federal government does it, that they have to report to Congress within 30 days. They wrote back, they said they don't know what I'm talking about. I think we have enough evidence that there's a spraying going all over the place.
We were warned about the takeover of our freedoms by the military-industrial complex by both Eisenhower and Kennedy. They're gaining traction on us, folks. We are in trouble more than just a spraying program.
All I can say is it's about time we get up in arms about this, because it is affecting our health. It's high time that we as citizens of this great country take action.
Board of Supervisors in Suffolk County, New York, they outlawed geochemical engineering. Hawaii passed an ordinance prohibiting geochemical engineering. I urge you to bar geoengineering in Shasta County and pass an ordinance. At least ask some damn questions. What the hell is all this aluminum doing here? Why are the trees dying, fishes dying? Why is there Alzheimer and aluminum spiking? And why are these fibers on the ground here in Shasta County? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marmon. Today, Shasta County Board of Supervisors has been the beneficiary of some sincere, passionate, and knowledgeable comments. And I thank you for those. I am in agreement with my colleagues about sending letters and a call for action, but I would hope that we could go a step further. I would like for us to send a copy of this video where all of you spoke today, all 2.5 or 3 hours of this testimony, to be sent to our senators and our U.S. representatives, and also our representatives in the state of California.
We'll do that.
Let them listen to the passion that came out of this meeting today. Thank you.
You have the motion in front of you. I think it's understood. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Motion passes unanimously. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the response is one that exceeds far the boundaries of Shasta County in terms of the platform that is offered, as evidenced by those who attended today from around the world. That's very impressive.
Carrier for all kinds of biological and chemical warfare. I think that they're getting people used to seeing these things, and they're getting the military used to doing it. So they're practicing. Yeah, I think most people have noticed chemtrails because it's not natural to have something crisscrossing in your sky and staying around for hours. And so they could combat global warming this way. So one of the things they're trying to do, apparently, is put metal particles into the air. They fall down, you know. It's kind of crazy, but anyway, that's one of the reasons. Chemtrail looks like a jet fume, but the jet discharge only lasts for about 15 or 16 seconds, whereas the chemtrail lasts for hours. And you can also see it keeps getting wider and wider, and if you look at it closely, it's dripping things. Now, from a former worker at the Oak Ridge nuclear plant, I found that the approach of our government to chemtrails is twofold. One is they think if they put metals up there over, places where there were cities or groups of people, they could deflect the sun's rays back up again. The other is what they're calling aerial pharmacopoeia. And they're using as their precedent the fact that people started adding iodine to salt in order to prevent goiters in areas that had low salt. So they said this has a precedent. So there are all kinds of things going on with these chemtrails. I think they're outrageous. They don't belong in our sky, and they're probably messing up things they don't even know about. And we don't need this kind of, dosing the population with unknown chemicals and messing up the body metabolism. So they can put chemicals into those chemtrails that come down on people and try to modify some of the bad effects of pollution. I think they're also a carrier for all kinds of biological and chemical warfare. So I don't think they're dropping them on us right now, but they seem to be preparing. I think that they're getting people used to seeing these things, and they're getting the military used to doing it. So they're practicing. and they're probably practicing with things they consider relatively harmless. Whether they really are, you know, we get fooled by a living system. Things that we think are harmless are not. And I find it very reckless to be putting things into the atmosphere without telling people, without knowing what they're going to do, and it's certainly an outrageous approach to global warming. They ought to be joining the Kyoto Pact and reducing the harmful emissions, not adding more to the atmosphere. They totally deny it. They just say it's just the exhaust from a jet motor. They totally deny it. People have been trying to find out all over, you know, what it is. I think there is an organization now in Phillipsburg in Pennsylvania. There's also a fairly large organization in Toronto. But I saw them over Paris. When you come in from overseas and you're up above the clouds, they're all crisscrossed like a checkerboard over Paris. It's over Geneva. It's you know, so I mean, I've seen this myself. I'm sure it's over other countries. It's in England. It's in Belgium. So you know, it's all over. They're doing this all over the earth.
Have you looked outside? Nefarious, mysterious, arrogant, Irish, and Aryan, planetary, humanitarian, terroristic, American, beware of the wicked, heroin, aerial housing. Hours, the pharaohs, and the parishes, perishing palace, and palace, and mouse, paralysis, callous for sin, scurrying, government, hurrying, various allergies, and showering, shining the light upon the sallows. Worrying, barbarian, Aurelian, draconian, reptilian, chameleon, illuminary, Luciferian, Aryan, Alamo, Valerian, the alien, behold the whole totalitarian, Machiavellian, Sumerian, Atlantean, Lemurian, Aquarian, Palladian, Assyrian, the Saturn, the Clarion, Saurian,
put the music up here for free. you are aware of a building energy within you. Everything has energy.
Bye.